She didn't know. But how could she have known that the young man that startled her in the thick, scary forest was the greatest king to be? But how did she end up standing beside him as his beloved queen at his coronation? She was just an orphan, a stranger in his kingdom, a taboo to their tradition. His kinsmen rebelled against her. A story of how a prince walked into a scary forest and found a girl with no title and changed the course of history. As the story goes,
as the ruling crown continued to fade, in the serene hills of the ancient town of Karwar, the scent of rain often clung to the air, and stories floated like dust in the sunlight. It was a land carved from tradition, rooted in rituals, and known for rulers who reigned with power and pride. But now, the great King Arkur of Karwar, whose voice once thundered in the council square, lay weak and near his end as his breath became weaker and slower. The palace walls that once echoed with laughter and royal commands now murmured with whispers and rumors, who will wear the crown next? Even the community elders exaggerated their kindness the prospective heir to the throne, for possible favors after coronation. Prince Tarda, the king's first son, stood tall with a warrior's frame and the gaze of a thoughtful ruler. Unlike many before him, Tarda wasn't intoxicated by power or blinded by entitlement. He walked among his people, listened to their songs, and shared their sorrows. He knew most of the common ones by names and related with them as equals. Yet, the weight of kingship loomed like a mountain on his shoulders. He knew that it was just a matter of days to come. And preparations were already taking shape as tradition demanded. Before King Arkur could pass on the sacred staff of rule, a final rite had to be fulfilled. As tradition demanded, Tarda must take a wife before coronation. The new king must be crowned with his queen, and since the prince was not married, he must take a wife immediately. The chosen bride, a graceful girl from a noble family, had already begun her 10-day fattening and grooming ritual, a revered process to prepare a queen worthy of Karwar's throne. But there was more. Tarda, too, must vanish from the town during these 10 days, hidden from all, alone in reflection. To immerse strength and wisdom from the gods and chose a path for his rule. The elders said it cleansed the prince of familiar pride and reminded him that power began with humility. Usually, the prince would dwell in the old mountain cave or beneath the sacred baobab grove. This time, Tarda chose the thick forest near the border of Tuda village, with a historic waterfall. No guards. No servants. Just silence, the crackle of wood, and his thoughts. On his third day in the forest, just as the morning mist began to lift, Tarda heard laughter, reflection of the sunlight that filtered through the canopies of the trees, songs and chatters, like wind chimes dancing through the trees. Crouching behind a curtain of ferns, he saw them, 3 young girls, each balancing bundles of firewood on their heads, chatting in the melodic dialect of Tuda that he understood very well. He wondered how they were able to carry such huge bundles of firewood on their heads to such distance. He knew he should be avoiding them, but his interest was not just tickled, it was also pulled. He revealed himself from his hiding and moved closer. And then he saw her. She walked slightly apart from the others, calm, with a quiet strength in her posture. Her name was Rabo. Her skin, visibly glistened with sweat, but her eyes held a calm depth, like a river that had seen many seasons. Her hair had fallen across her cheek, and when she tucked it behind her ear, Tarda felt the world pause and something shifted in him. He lost a flash. And then they locked eyes for a moment, but she hesitated. He stepped forward towards her as the other girls looked curiously. "I am just a traveler," he said, unsure how to introduce himself. Rabo tilted her head and thought for a while. "From Karwar?" she guessed, and he nodded. She smiled. "You don't look like a hunter. You look like someone who's trying not to be seen," Rabo said with a casual smile. And with that, she quickened her step and walked past him. And that was how it all began. 10 days, 1 heart. Each day after, Tarda would find a reason to wander where Robbo fetched firewood. He helped her carry bundles of firewood and fetched water, and once built a makeshift bench by the stream. They talked, of village dreams, of songs, of what scared them and what made them laugh, and their relationship waxed stronger and they shared personal matters. Their intimacy gathered momentum. Robbo had lost her father when she was just 10 years of age, and struggled to raise her younger siblings on her own. And now, she spoke like someone who had lived twice. Her strength wasn't loud, but consuming and rooted. By the seventh day of what turned out to be like a primitive kind of honeymoon vacation for Tarda and Robbo, he could not hide his heart anymore, but opened up on what was already obvious. "I don't want to return alone," he said, his voice low, and his eyes fixed on her fingers tracing patterns in the soil. The effect of what he just said was not a declaration as it may have seemed, but it was rather compelling. She turned her head gently and thoughtfully and looked at him as the real implication of what he just said settled into her understanding. "You're a prince," she replied. "You belong to a different world entirely, and we are both from two different worlds apart. I want you to share my world with me. I believe in faith and destiny. I believe it was the hand of fate that brought me here to meet with you. And on that fateful day, you were 3 girls, and I only saw one of you. And now, I am only sitting here with one of you. And that is you," he said. Robbo blinked. "The elders of Karwar will never allow it," she said reasonably. "And your bride that is already prepared for you and her family will hate me for the rest of their lives," she said. "Do you prefer that I reigned as the king, whose wife was chosen for, and programmed for the rest of my life?" "I don't care what they think or say," he replied firmly. "Tradition matters, but love should matter more." She didn't answer, and when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. On the 10th morning, with the palace already prepared and looking colorful for his return, the gates of Karwar had never known such stir. Tarda stunned the entire village with the unthinkable. The prince was returning, not alone, not triumphant, but hand in hand with a girl no one knew. He returned to Karwar with Robbo by his side. At first, it was like an acquaintance that he met on his way back. But when reality struck on everyone, jaws dropped. The royal drummers froze. The nobles waiting to usher him to the ancestral shrine gasped. And the bride-in-waiting, who had spent days in the fattening room, oiled, adorned, and isolated in expectation, collapsed in tears when she heard the news. The council of elders, which comprised of a circle of gray-bearded men who guarded the law of the land like a sacred relic, summoned Tarda before them at once. And of course, with the king in present. "You have spat upon the face of our ancestors," roared Elder Karwar, with his voice trembling with fury. "You were given 10 days to cleanse your soul, not to corrupt it and spit on the grounds of our tradition." He said. "I cleansed my soul, and I followed my soul," Tarda replied calmly. "She is a stranger, and as far as I can remember, her people have never brought gifts to our palace. Her name is not written in our records. Her womb is unproven. Her family is not noble," another elder bellowed. "She is kind and she is brave. She speaks truth and she understands silence. She will make a queen greater than any robe or lineage," Tarda insisted, standing his ground. The room shook with shouting, but then, like the crack of thunder through the clouds, the voice of King Arkur, weak but commanding, rose from his throne. "My son has chosen, and I will not unmake his heart." A hush fell, as the king spoke authoritatively. Elder Karwar dropped to his knees, his face hidden. He understood the king's word was final. But he also knew, and so did everyone, that the battle had only begun. In the shadows behind tradition, always lurk those who benefit from its chains. Chief Okadi, who was the father of the rejected bride, was not just insulted, he was humiliated. For years, he had maneuvered, gifted, and schemed to place his daughter on the throne. He had already boasted to outsiders of his soon-to-be royal in-law status. But now, he was the joke of the land. He decided not to take it lightly nor sit quietly. As whispers spread like wildfires at Harmattan, some said Robbo was a forest witch who had bewitched the prince. Others claimed she had cursed the fattening room, causing the official bride to fall mysteriously ill. Many simply hated her for being unknown and an outsider. Some went with the belief that the gods gave him his true wife. One evening, Robbo's family hut in Tudu was set ablaze by masked men. Robbo and her family fled to a hidden place under the king's secret protection, but the people were divided. Some admired Tarda's courage. He is a man of his heart, they said. Others called for his removal. He is unworthy to be king if he rejects the laws. The council was split, the palace was tense, and the village drumbeats lost their rhythm. A day before the coronation, the elders made a final but risky offer. Knowing that they were testing the patience of the old king and troubling him over the same matter, if you send the girl away and marry the chosen bride, your kingship will be uncontested, said Elder Karwar. Do this, and history will forgive your youthful rebellion. But Tarda stood before them, regal even without the crown, and said, if the throne requires me to lie, betray my soul, and abandon the one I love, then the throne is not worth sitting on. The room froze. King Arker, tears in his eyes, stood and raised his weak arm. A king must see what others cannot see. He must feel what others fear. He must love beyond rules, and lead beyond comfort. Then, before all the elders, he placed the sacred staff into Tarda's hands. I see a new kind of king, he whispered. And may the gods of Karwar walk with you. Tarda was crowned the new king of Karwar. And beside him stood Robbo, wrapped in a deep indigo cloth, eyes burning not with fear, but with fire. She was the queen. With no crown, though Robbo stood beside the king, she wore no golden necklace, no beaded crown, and no royal ankle chains. The elders refused to recognize her officially as queen. The title was withheld, but that was to the detriment of the face of Karwar that went down in history as the kingdom that crowned a king without a crown for the queen. But to Robbo and Tarda, her king, she was in her rightful place. Her seat in council gatherings remained empty initially, but the individual fear of the unknown eventually made them to honor her with her entitlement. Still, she remained less interested with vanities. The palace maids called her the girl from the bush behind her back. Some servants even refused to serve her meals. Some simply worked quietly, hiding their fears because they believed that Robbo was the spirit of the gods. But Robbo was raised in hardship, and so, she was not shaken. The battlefield. The regrets and the triumph. How did the glorious days of Karwar begin? Who really was Robbo?
As the story goes,
Instead of waiting to be adored, she went to the market square and sat with women pounding yam. She helped a sick widow clean her thatched roof, and also visited the village school and taught the children Tudu proverbs. Bit by bit, the people began to see a different queen that preferred not to reign on the throne of power and authority, but in the ears of humanity with kindness. She is not proud. She listens before she speaks. She remembers names. She comes to help, not to rule. The chatters went round. Robbo did not need a throne to be queen. She wore humility as her robe and earned respect through grace. Even the harshest elder, Baba Tata, whispered one evening, the gods may have truly sent her to our people. But Chief Okadi had not forgotten his disgrace. He partnered with distant chiefs, promising them land and royal favors if they could rally support to dethrone Tarda. Whispers of rebellion rose from the corners of Karwar. Secret meetings were held under the cloak of moonless nights. A poison was prepared, not for Tarda, but for Robbo. They knew that without her, the king's spirit would break. One afternoon, while Robbo visited the orphan hut in the outer village, a little girl handed her a calabash of groundnut soup, with uncertain look that was woven with childishness. It is from the palace, the child said innocently. But Robbo had once seen a goat fall dead after tasting such a mixture in Tudu. She collected it and set it aside. Moments later, while she was playing with the little child and others, a dog wandered in and licked from the calabash. The dog died instantly in seconds. The poison was concocted to have a very strong and immediate effect. In order to give no room for an antidote to be administered if the impact is delayed. The news spread like fire through dry grass. The people were enraged. This was no longer a matter of tradition, but generally accepted as evil. And suddenly, the lines between old custom and personal vendetta became clear. Chief Okadi was summoned, and before the king's guard, he confessed under pressure, in the presence of wise men who already made their revelations. He was banished from Karwar, and his titles stripped, his name removed from royal records. Tarda wept silently in his chamber, when he heard what nearly happened. That night, he stood at the balcony overlooking Karwar and whispered to the stars, "I chose Robbo, but it is she who saves me every day." As months passed, and then years counted their reigns, what began as a divided kingdom slowly became a land envied by neighboring villages, towns and villages, under King Tarda's rule. Roads connecting Karwar to remote farmlands and important places were built. A festival honoring both Karwar and Tudu customs was introduced and marked with resounding festivities. Trade increased, and merchants visibly sang his praises. Crime declined drastically and justice became fair. But it was Robbo's heart that beat behind many of these reforms. She started a palace program where village girls could come and learn weaving, song, storytelling, and herbal knowledge. She opened a widow's garden and ensured every abandoned elder had food, and well taken care of. Children grew up chanting, "Robbo the root, Tarda the tree." Some faction of the villagers became absolutely convinced of their earlier suspicion, that Robbo was a spirit of the gods that came back with Tarda from the forest. She was even revered by some. Even the bitter elders came to bless their union. The elders regretted their initial hesitation to crown Robbo as the queen, but gave thanks to the gods, that they eventually crowned her and gave her all her deserved entitlements. The queen was really Her Majesty the Great, from the gods of Karwar. That belief was commonly conventional in the hearts of the good people of Karwar. 7 years into Tarda's reign, Karwar knew peace, too much peace, some would say. For in the silence of progress, old enemies stirred. A neighboring kingdom of Baram, once jealous of Karwar's growing economy and influence, began to press into the borderlands. They claimed ancestral rights to a stretch of fertile land near the Tudukarwar riverbanks. The land Tarda had transformed into shared farmland for both communities. Envoys were sent but talks failed. And one morning, a farmer's blood was spilled at the edge of the disputed field. The drums of war returned, and Tarda gathered his council. Some advised aggression, while others called for surrender. Robbo had always been calm in storms, waited for the psychological moment to speak wisdom. And so it was that when it was time to speak, she said gently, "If we must fight, let it be for the future of our children and not the pride of our past." Tarda sent his most trusted warriors to high places within the farmland. Not to battle, but to protect the farmlands and evacuate women and children. Still, Baram attacked under nightfall, and it was a brief but brutal raid. Fires rose high, lighting up the affected environment, and screams filled the night. But what Baram didn't know was that Robbo had sent secret scouts through the mountains 2 days before. Her move saved hundreds. Karwar's warriors ambushed the raiders on their return path. The kingdom was defended, but with a minimal loss. The attackers fled in different directions into bushes, but some of them were caught as prisoners of war. An investigation revealed that the feud was actually instigated and fueled by a man, whose origin was Karwar, an elder who sat among the elders and king of Karwar, an elder who had schemed and influenced decisions-making in the council of elders in Karwar. It was Chief Okadi, who was banished from the kingdom of Karwar, that plotted against the peaceful dwelling and glorious days of Karwar. He disappeared in his exile into the thin air when words got to him that his atrocities had been revealed and he had been declared wanted. Peace returned to Karwar. Robbo's foresight had once again become Karwar's shield, and the elders renamed that battle, the Fire of the Queen's Mind. In a continent where kings often took multiple wives to strengthen alliances, posterity, and expand influence, King Tarda became known and referenced for something rare. He never married another wife, and infidelity was never in his cards. Every offer from chiefs, every request from noblemen, every plea from distant lands to wed their daughters for political gain was met with a gentle but firm refusal. And his fraternity was never cut short. "I found a woman who feeds my soul and compliments me in every standing. I will not starve my spirit to please tradition and politics," he always said. And so it was that Robbo remained the only wife of the king, loved, cherished, and honored above politics. Some mocked him while others admired him, but none could deny that the bond between Tarda and Robbo was the anchor of their kingdom. Even the wandering bards sang, "He wore no ring but her name on his tongue, no jewel shined brighter than her gaze in the sun." The king who ruled many, but was ruled by one. Time passed like river water, moving gently through Karwar. As people grew in obedience to life and nature, Robbo and Tarda grew older, their hair sprinkled with the color of wisdom. Their children, 3 sons and 2 daughters, were raised in humility, taught to sit among the people before standing above them. Tarda, once doubted and mocked, became the model of just leadership. When he built the Great Hall of Unity, he inscribed no statue of himself. Only a proverb that read, "The tree does not boast of its height. It lets the shade speak." And when the time came for his eldest son to take the sacred staff, just as it had been done before, Tarda whispered the same words his father once did, "I see a new kind of king. May the gods of Karwar walk with you." It remains a common belief till this day, amongst the people of Karwar, that the sun rose more gently the day King Tarda passed on to eternal glory. Even when he had grown old, his mind remained sharp like a fresh blade. He spent his final years teaching in the village school, sitting under trees with farmers, and sharing quiet mornings with Robbo, his eternal queen. On the eve of his passing, he called for her and whispered, "When I die, bury no gold with me. Place a single kola nut in my hand, and whisper your name into the wind. That will be enough." He slept peacefully and looked younger and handsome at death. No pain. No fear. Just silence and breath. And then, like a flame easing into the dusk, he was gone. The palace mourned, but not with wailing. As instructed by Robbo, the people came, not in black but in colors. They sang the songs of Tudu and Karwar as one people. Even distant chiefs, politicians and business associates, came to pay homage to the man they had always admired. In Karwar's grand square, a tree stands today, the tree of Tarda. Planted by Robbo herself, its roots feeds on the soil he once walked, its leaves whispering the stories of unity, courage, and undying love. Children gather beneath the tree to hear tales of how a prince walked into a forest, found a girl with no title, and changed the course of history. The time of Tarda, they call it. A time when love rose above law, when peace ruled over pride, and when a kingdom remembered that greatness is not in how many bow before you, but in how many stand because of you. And though centuries passed, the wind still carries his name. Tarda. The king who chose one woman, one heart, one path, and made his people one.
Please subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories.